Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to Olainfarm Investor Conference webinar about financial results and company's activities of the second quarter of year 2017. Today we are hosted by Olainfarm Management Board member Salvis Lapiņš. Before I give the floor to Salvis, a short reminder about the agenda of the webinar. As always, we will start with the company's presentation, after which Salvis will answer all your questions. If you would like to use this unique opportunity to ask a question directly to Mr. Lapiņš, please use the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. All questions will be addressed after the presentation. However, you can send the questions in during the presentation. Salvi, I invite you to start the presentation.
Thank you, Eva. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to have yet another webinar of ours. I just counted, and this turns out to be 23rd webinar, so quarter of 100 is not that far. Yeah, let us start. As usual, we will have a sort of official part, which is myself looking at how we've been performing in Q2 and first half, and then we'll have a focus session, as we normally do. So let us start. Let's first have a look at the second quarter. As you see, in terms of sales, this has been a great quarter of ours. We made a total of more than 34 million euros worth of sales, and I can see in the charts it's clearly the best quarter of ours, an increase by 25% compared to second quarter of last year. Pharmacies have added 2.6 million net, or 5.1 million gross. Silvanos has added 1 million net, or 1.1 million gross, and Tone Sales has added 2 million to these sales. Now, if you look at profit is certainly not as nice, as you can also see in the charts. We are talking about roughly 2 million euros, which is a reduction of almost precisely a third compared to second quarter of last year, where we made net profit of roughly 3 million, and this quarter we made profit slightly above 2 million. Well, main factors influencing were increase in sales costs. They used to be 28.4% of sales to 31.1% of sales, and administrative costs also have increased, not as dramatically, but still by 1 percentage point, from 16.7 to 17.7. Now, as we've explained that in a management report, if you read that, partially that is because in very many new countries we have established new sales offices, especially we're talking about Central Asian countries, and some of them we transformed from rep offices to our daughter companies. Also, during this year, we have established a have acquired Tonus Elast, and that has added, of course, to both administrative and sales costs. We have created our daughter company in Russia named Elast Medical, which is primarily dealing with distribution and marketing and sales of Tonus Elast products and Silvanos products. We have launched in this recent period some marketing campaign of Silvanos in Russia, which doesn't bring any returns yet, so that has also therefore added to our sales costs. Other one-offs impacting the profits are forex loss of about 2 million in this quarter alone, and also provisions of about 400,000 euros for a company called Olainfarm Lapiņš Center, or Olain Health Center, which is a local sort of polyclinic that we acquired in the middle of second quarter of this year. So as you can see, unfortunately, although in terms of sales we've been performing very nicely, in terms of profit this has been one of the weakest quarters in our recent history. However, EBITDA has been improving a little, because one of the main factors, which was forex loss of 2 million, is of course not part of EBITDA. EBITDA is improving a bit, so we're at 19.2 million for last 12 months, and 16% margin, which is also a slight improvement. Now, if you look Q2 separately in terms of sales to countries, Russia is again a good leader, a clear leader. You can see that its share has increased to 33% from 28% of Q1. Latvia's share has therefore been diluted from the same 28%. You may remember that in Q1, Russia's share and Latvia's share was basically equal. Latvia's share is down to 22, but it's really diluted. Russia itself has been growing, as you will see in following charts. Ukraine has recovered a little bit. It used to be 7% in Q1, now it's 11%, and that combined to Russia and combined with Latvia has diluted Belarus share down to 7% from 12. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Poland, they have improved significantly their shares, and last three have replaced Lithuania, Germany, and Georgia, which you no longer can see in top 10 countries charts in Q2 compared to Q1. Now, if you're talking about products, Q2, Nullfen has improved significantly. It used to be 10% of our product sales in the first quarter. Now it has doubled its share to 20% and has become a best-selling product. Nerimidin also has been a long-term lead of ours, has also been performing very nicely as it grew from 14% in Q1 to 19% in Q2, and some growth has been demonstrated by Furgin, which is a smaller generic product. That one has gone from 2 to 3%. Shares of all other products shrunk, but for the first time in our pie chart of top 10 products, we can see Memantine with 2% share in 2007, and it has replaced Remantadine. Now, if you look at consolidated sales, this pie chart combined, which are sales of Olainfarm products, is making up about 68% of our total consolidated sales. So as our group grows, as more and more daughter companies, more and more pharmacies we have, impact of Olainfarm products is reducing. If you look at 6 months in total, in terms of sales, we are again doing very nicely. Our sales are at 62.7 million, and they've increased by 17% compared to first half of last year. Among others, toner sales contributed 4 million, and NPK Paratest contributed 1 million to this increase. Pharmacies had a 9.4. Those two companies are the companies that we basically didn't have in the first half of last year. Pharmacies have added 9.4 million gross, or 4.4 net, and Silinos has added slightly above 2 million to this sales increase. And with the profits, unfortunately, it's a similar story as the one that we saw in the quarter profitability. I have a profit of 5.7, a reduction by 7% compared to compared to first half of 2016, and same forex loss of 2 million in Q2 and provisions of 400,000 to all especially invest centers, along with increases in sales and administrative costs, of course, have been contributing to this. In terms of products, if you look at top 15 products in terms of sales are performing quite nicely. 10 out of top 15 are growing. Formac Furosol has been one of the leaders in first half. It's the third best-selling product, and it has added 1 million to total sales. Nullfen in 6-month terms, it's the second best product, and that has added 500,000. Para-aminosalicylic acid, one of our good sellers for a number of years now, has added about 400,000. In relative terms, Memantine, the product that showed up in Q2 top 10 pie chart, has added 185% sales. Ethanol has added 65%, and 1-chloride 3.5 dimethyl adamantane, I'm glad I pronounced it somehow, has added 45% compared to first half of last year. Unfortunately, Adaptol has shrunk, and we lost about almost 1 million in sales for that product. All others combined shrunk even more, about 2 million, and Remantadine has shrunk by about 50,000. So all other 3 products that have sales reduced or have been reduced by even smaller amounts than 50,000. And a similar situation if you look at the loss in sales in relative terms. About 50% we lost from all the others, 60% from other and 7% in environmental dining. In total, Olainfarm products, sales of Olainfarm products in 6 months were 40.7 million euros, which is a slight increase of 0.4%. Now, if you look at top 15 countries, also most of countries are growing, and as you know, in terms of sales, we really are having a great year so far. In monetary terms, it's Netherlands, which is basically WHO, or World Health Organization, has added 3 million. Russia has added 2.4 million, and Latvia has added 1.7 million. In relative terms, it's again Netherlands, or WHO, which has added 600%, or 7 times the sales of last year. Georgia is more than 3 times, or 224%, and Germany is almost exactly 3 times, so 205%, compared to the sales to that country in first half of 2016. Ukraine is still not recovered. We're still very, very much behind what we made there last year, missing about 3.6 million euros in sales. All other markets combined, we're lacking almost 1 million in sales, and Uzbekistan is improving, especially in second quarter of the year, but still we're about 300,000 euros behind the sales schedule that we experienced in Uzbekistan last year, or about 21%. In Ukraine, we are behind for about 40%, and all others combined, we are behind last year's schedule by about 20%. One of the potential viewers of ours has been submitting questions prior to this webinar, and I would like to encourage all the others of you too to do the same, because that gives us an opportunity to prepare an answer. And the question was about the operating results of our major daughter companies, and so I was able to prepare the answer to that question in advance. So unconsolidated sales of our top 3 daughter companies, Latvijas Aptieka has added 10 million in sales with operating profit 2.6 million, net profit 0.4 million. Tonus LS plus LS Medical, which is LS Medical, as I explained, is a company 100% owned by Olainfarm, based in Russia, and basically the main activity of theirs is marketing and distribution of Tonus LS products in Russia. So these 2 companies combined have made sales of 6.3 million, or the operating profit of 2.3 million, net profit 500,000. And Silvernols has added 2.4 million in sales, 1.3 million in operating profit, and about 100,000 euros in net profit. Now, quite traditionally, this is about the time I usually ask you to answer our very typical, very traditional poll question, which normally comes as the first one, and that is, what do you think of our results of this quarter? Are they better than expected? Are they worse than expected? Or are they just as expected? Please take some time and I'll click the answer. And in the meantime, I will show you what I've done. As I said, this is our 23rd webinar, and I've been asking this question in every single one of them. And I've done some summarizing, and I've come up with well, maybe an interesting chart, which you'll see shortly. But in the meantime, I'll take a few more seconds to click your answer. Okay, thank you. I see it's done. Yes, so I've been asking this question for last, well, every single webinar that we had, starting with 2012, and now the blue line demonstrates percentage of audience that were somehow surprised by our results, and the green line demonstrates what the results were. And we can see that basically zero surprise level is somewhere in the area of 3 million per quarter. Since we've been quite below 3 million in this quarter, I guess I know what your answers were. So yeah, that's about it. Yeah, we see in this chart that in many places where we are talking about 3 million profits per quarter, people are 0% surprised. Recent events, as we hinted pretty much in our management reports, and I mean those of you who are following us can of course see that we are somewhat behind the schedule specifically in terms of profitability. In terms of sales, we're doing just fine, but in terms of profitability, we are somewhat missing the target that we announced earlier this year. So it was obvious that we will have to reconsider what the realistic profit target of both consolidated numbers and unconsolidated numbers would be. Yeah, so since we have higher than expected sales and administrative costs, and we have some forex loss already, we have come up with new projections for the remainder of the year. So total for the year, we expect that standalone net profit will be 11 million euros, and previously we were planning 12.7 million euros. Consolidated net profit, we are now planning at 13.5 million euros, whereas previously we expected 15.5 million euros, so 2 million reduction in our profit forecast. And that one of the important factors influencing this is, of course, how ruble will behave. And these estimates are forex neutral, as we call them. So this is with an assumption that there will be no major forex gains or forex losses until the end of the year. And of course, since, as I said, our sales are performing quite nicely, we do not amend our sales forecasts in any way. So have a look at these numbers. And since you, I guess, been following our numbers, reports, announcements quite closely, let me come up with the next poll question. And the question is, what do you think of the targets for 2017? What does your analysis show? What does your feeling show? And do you think they're too optimistic? Or do you think that's somewhere close to what the reality might be? Or you think they're pessimistic and basically we will be performing better than we think, than we have suggested within these numbers? So please take your time to answer this. I'll give you a few more seconds. Now, as you're voting, making your choices, after the official part, it's yeah. Thank you for those who voted. You know, every single webinar after the official part, we do have something that we focus specifically strongly on. In most cases, we've been talking about either daughter companies or some products of ours or some markets of ours. But for many webinars in a row, I've been receiving you know, the emails, the messages from you, and several times about the you know, what should we go into greater detail about. And several times it was mentioned that we should probably go into greater detail about how do pharma companies actually arrive to a brand new medicines. Now, many of you have asked, like, do Olainfarm has any intention to come up with brand new molecule and brand new medicine, and what's actually how does this actually happen? And you know, sometimes the wider public, the question is, why are new good medicines so expensive? So yeah, as a result of all that, I've finally, keeping my promise, So yeah, here will be a few slides on how, in very general terms, how does the development and discovery of new drug happen. For those of you who are very familiar with how it happens from your daily experiences, please excuse me for very simplified approaches here. For those of you who are not that familiar with the process, I hope this might provide a good insight in how does that actually happen. Why is it that Olainfarm is not, or any other company size of Olainfarm is not keen on developing brand new molecule? Maybe that will get explained. Now, what do we need new medicines? Of course, new medicines are only there. Then it makes sense to have one if they can offer fewer side effects to patients, fewer hospitalizations, improved quality of life, meaning people could do things they couldn't do with previous medication. Maybe they can still be productive, and which is most important, maybe their life expectancy can be prolonged. But in order to make sure that some of these promises are actually kept, there are very many stages through which the developer has to go through to make sure that the product is actually safe, it actually is what's called efficacious, which means that it can actually do the effect that it's promising, and all of that has been proved and confirmed in a decent way. So that's the long story short. Whatever it takes from the idea to medicine. Well, this is still a short, long story short, but slightly more professional. But we will of course go into a little bit greater detail about how does that happen. So just like everything, this thing starts with an idea. You have an idea that this might work. Then you have a discovery process. You narrow down the types of molecules that might actually work. Then you characterize it. Then you try to produce it for the first time. And then you do the preclinical research, which is in laboratory on animals, but not on humans. And then you do clinical research, which involves humans. And then you do the drug registration process, and only after that the product is allowed on the market. But you do keep researching your product pretty much for the entire lifetime of it, because you might need to adjust your dosages, because you might need to include new ways of new diagnosis to that, new indications. And there's also a process called pharmacovigilance, which basically means that you do monitor your product all the time for possibly new side effects as well. So discovery, basically all the process starts in laboratory, and the early stages of that research includes all the activities required to understand what the disease is that you are targeting, to choose the molecule that participates in that disease and condition that you want to affect, and for that you might have somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 potential molecules that you think could be targeting that molecule in your body that needs to be affected. And as a result of that, you find some scope of what's called promising molecules or lead compounds that could potentially be the best choices of all those 5,000 to 10,000 molecules to actually influence the molecule in your body that needs to be influenced. The early stage pharmacology studies, they are helping to characterize the mechanism. They're trying to help you understand how that molecule that you may have chosen, how would it actually influence your body. And once you have the first suspicion, you of course try to do some work to actually prove it, and then you narrow down the potential molecules. Then you are ready to do the toxicity tests, and unfortunately you have to do it first on animals, and only then you can proceed with that. And that whole process might take up somewhere between 3 and 6 years from the idea until when you're ready to start with the preclinical trial. Now, in order to produce any trials, of course, you need the product. So developers must start manufacturing. And one of the very important things is what was called final dosage form. And one thing is you have a chemical compound with a molecule, but it also requires you to understand and find the best way of delivering that molecule to that active molecule to the place in your body when you want it to operate. And this is very important because once you come up with the final dosage form, that is the form that you will be using for preclinical and clinical trials. So that this stage requires a lot of attention. Also, at this stage, you need to start studying the stability of product. Whether after once you have your active molecule and you made it into, let's say, tablet, how stable it is. Is it still active ingredient? Is it still there, or has it been reacting with other compounds in the tablet? How does it react to the light, the heat, humidity, etc., etc.? And no matter what happens, I mean, you have to be sure that for a certain amount of time, your tablet will still contain a certain amount of active ingredients, and of course, no toxic side products. Now, before you can start testing the product on people, you have to do certain testing on animals to answer your major questions, basic questions about bioactivity, safety, and efficacy. I mean, does it actually provide the effect that you want? You also need to check whether the product is toxic or not. And of course, you need to identify the dose levels, what the safe human dose might be. You, of course, need to understand how quickly the product gets absorbed to your body, where it distributes, how is it being destroyed, and how it being, discharged from the body. And only then you can start with the clinical trials. But before you can proceed to trying the product on people, you have to, of course, do all the preclinical activities that I was speaking about. Now, clinical trials in classic ways, they're separated into three phases. In the first study, you will have up to 100 healthy volunteers, or maybe people with a disease or condition that you want to treat. That study might last several months. And of course, the first stage, you are checking safety in the dosage on people. And the experience shows that about 70% of drugs that are entering this stage of development are then cleared to proceed to the next phase. Now, in the next phase, you have about between 100 and 300 patients with this disease. This disease, depending on the results, may last from several months to about 3 years. At this stage, you are in greater detail looking at efficacy of the product, how well it works on the condition, and you are checking for side effects. Now, this is a lot more detailed, a lot more careful phase of the research, and only about a third of the products, and you can imagine how much money has a company or developer invested in a molecule, made it to the clinical studies phase 2, and many molecules have already been announced, invalid before that, and from what's left, only 1/3 make it further. So lots of investments, and honestly, reasonably high risk investments. Now we proceed to phase 3 studies, and here you may have up to about 3,000, from 300 to 3,000 patients. And this study, depending on the results and depending how detailed measurements you want to make, may last up to 4 years. Also, by the way, depending on how successful you can find 3,000 patients, sometimes it could be a rare disease, and just finding a patient might not be easy. Here you again check efficacy. You compare sometimes how your product might compare to existing products that are supposed to treat the same condition. and you check for all sorts of adverse reactions of this product. And only 1/4 to 1/3 of products that have entered phase 3 are then cleared to proceed for the next level, which is pretty much a registration process. Now, that means that you are preparing a file, a new drug application, and that is supposed to tell the full story of the drug from the very inception of idea until the clinical trial phase 3. By this application and all the information contained there, you have to demonstrate that the drug is safe and effective, and all the statements that you may have need to have a scientific backing. Then it's up to a competent authority in every country. You have some sort of drug registration organization that has to review this file and come up with a verdict whether they approve this product for sale in their country or not. And like I said, even after the product is cleared and registered and allowed to the market, competent authorities continue monitoring all the safety issues, and in case the developer, producer wants to amend something in the application of a product, would that be length of administration, would it be dosage, would that be new indications, they need to, just like before, they need to prove all new things in this description by a relevant scientific study. So pretty much for the active, lively, promoted product, some sort of study continues throughout the lifetime of the product. So on average, it takes about 10 years from the idea to marketplace. Just clinical trials alone might take up to 7 years, and it's very hard to speculate on the cost of a product, but it's at least €1 billion, and not all of the products are actually making it to the end. And the statistics show that in recent years, since the requirements are getting tougher and tougher, the overall probability of clinical success is less than 12%. So if you come up with 10 medicines, then 10 ideas, then maybe 1 of the 10 might make it to the market if you are just as successful as your average developer. So that was my promise about short introduction on how it is that new medicines are appearing on the market. And now the last poll question, we somehow made a few steps away from Olainfarm. So I want to bring you back, and in coming days there is a next part of dividends paid. It's 22 € per share. And I'm curious, what is it you want to do with that money? Are you gonna get that money and buy more Olainfarm shares? Are you going to get that money invested elsewhere? Are you going to get that money and sell all your holdings to Olainfarm? Or have some, or you're not a shareholder of Olainfarm and you're now terribly regretting it. So please take a moment to answer the question. And after that question, we will proceed to Q&A session, as we usually do at the very end of the webinar. Thanks for those who voted. And this is it with the sort of my part of the presentation. So I'm more than glad to answer your questions. Eva?
Salvi, thank you for the very interesting explanation of the product development cycle and the presentation itself. Now let's proceed with the questions in the order they were received. A reminder to those who haven't yet submitted their questions, you can do it in the questions section in the settings panel zone. And let's start with the questions that were sent in before the webinar. And the first question is, will selling expense remain as high as it has been in 2017 first half?
Yes, they will remain in that area. However, if you do the sort of relative comparison, it will not grow anymore as much. I mean, in Q2, in the second half of the year alone, if you will compare it to second half of last year, the growth rate will be smaller for a number of reasons that I explained. For instance, in the first half of last year, we didn't have Tonus Celest at all. We didn't have Elast Medical at all. We didn't have NPK Biotest at all. And they came into group with their administrative costs, their sale costs. Now, when you will compare second half to the second half, you will still see some mild increase, but it will not be as huge as first half to first half. So yeah, the short answer would be that they will remain at this level, but they are not in a way expected to grow as quickly as they were relatively growing in first quarters of this year. Eva?
Thank you. The next question: why payables to related companies are up that much? Reason for the increase?
Yeah, well, that's a good story. Now, payables to related parties, they're up at the end of second quarter compared to the end of first quarter last year because of dividends. Because once shareholders meeting has decided to make dividend payments, and as you know, this year dividend payments are big, then instantly it becomes a liability to the company. And since our shareholders are our related parties, this is how we categorize them. So at the time of preparation of first half review, I believe there are about close to 7 million outstanding dividend payments. So this explains absolutely vast majority of increase in that position. Eva?
Thank you. Is Olainfarm hedging against currency fluctuations?
Olainfarm is not hedging sort of the traditional way, and since you have a new people in audience, let me shortly explain you how we work with currency risks. Now, our major currency risk, of course, is created by Russian ruble, because a vast majority of our assets, and namely those would be receivables, are let's say the vast foreign currency element in our assets is ruble related, and those would mainly be receivables from Russia. Now, how do we deal with Russian ruble risk? Is that for a number of reasons, including bureaucratic reasons, some Russian partners do prefer to pay us in rubles, and we are totally happy to do that, given some conditions. Now, and conditions are that our sort of nominal price list with our Russian partners is still in euros, and then every single quarter we would apply a new exchange rate to that price list. And normally that exchange rate would be about 10% more rubles to euro than would be an official exchange rate at the beginning of the quarter. Now, with that exchange rate, we'll pretty much have to live for roughly 6 months, as there are 3 months of the regular quarter, and then plus 3 months is the payment term. Now, what does it do to our financials? It does inflate the top line, because basically we are inflating our sales price, and then all the risks, if there are all the currency risks, if they do materialize, are showing up, of course, in a forex line. Sometimes it does happen that we have done both. We have inflated our top line, and ruble increases in value, and we have, on top of that, we also have a forex gain. But like it happened in Q1 this year, but sometimes it happens, like in Q2 this year, that we have this inflated top line, but part of that inflated top line is then lost by a forex loss. So that's the way we do it. Now, we have historically compared that to what if we were hedging from day one, and in a vast majority of cases we are better off with this mechanism versus your traditional hedging. Eva?
Thank you. With the new acquisition, should we be expecting lower levels of sustainable EBITDA margins going forward?
Well, it depends really. If you're referring to acquisitions, and let me now see the question. Yeah, well, it depends on what we acquire really. If you have business like pharmacies, then of course EBITDA levels in pharmacies are much lower than production companies. Whereas if the acquisition is something like Torn Cellast, for instance, which is a reasonably profitable production company, and EBITDA levels are comparable, and some products might be even higher than average Olainfarm, then you might have either neutral EBITDA influence or positive. Yes, since vast majority of group sales increase over the last number of years has come from acquiring pharmacies. Sometimes we do acquire pharmacies that alone are making 1 million euros sales per annum or more. Then of course the dilutive effect is there, and EBITDA margins generally are falling. But until recently, when we started to provide last year for Ukrainian partners, we saw the trend that although EBITDA margins were dropping, nominal EBITDA was increasing. So again, the short answer to your question is it depends on what kind of acquisition it is. But at the end of the day, we are looking not that much on EBITDA margins, but we are more looking at EBITDA levels, the nominal EBITDA. Eva?
Thank you. When is the registration process in Turkey going to end?
Yeah, there's not much new, no major good news or bad news compared to what we were talking about for the last couple of quarters. We are still expecting the first registration. The two products approaching registration, so to speak. They are about 2 months from each other, and we are expecting both of them somewhere at the end of the year, beginning next year. So might be quite possible that one of them will be registered, say, end of this year, another one early next year. Like I said, yeah, that schedule has been in place for about, I don't know, 6 months or so, I know. Eva?
Thank you. Coming back to foreign exchange questions, based on current FX rates, can you give an outlook for further losses to be taken in second half?
Nope, because that's, ruble's behavior as really, I mean, we are not into forex prediction business, and from what we've seen, even the forex analysts have not always been able to predict that correctly. I mean, look historically at how our forex gains or losses have been doing. It could be anything really, so I wouldn't even take the chance to speculate on that. And this is one of the reasons that we came up with, forex neutral assumptions for the second half. There've been good quarters and bad quarters, and I have no courage to speculate on what I think of Q4 this year in terms of euro-ruble. So no, I cannot give an outlook on forex. Eva?
Thank you. The next question. Where do you stand on the need for additional provisions against accounts receivable?
Well, since last year, when we made the major provisions provisions for accounts receivables for Ukraine, we don't really have anything as urgent. And at the end of the year, beginning of this year, we raised this issue with auditors. I mean, there's nothing really as dramatic as Ukrainian receivables were. However, and also it seems that the process of sort of consolidation, regrouping in Russian pharma wholesale market is over, so it seems to be calming down there as well. So I don't expect any major needs to provide for accounts receivable by the end of the year. Sometimes in the smaller markets you have these sort of one-off situations, like I think it was Uzbekistan last year. We provided 200,000. Smaller clients in smaller countries might appear, but I don't see any major provisions on that. However, the forecast that we just amended, they do include about €500,000 on accounts receivable by the end of the year, for the sort of unforeseen receivable situations. So even if we have provision, even if I have to make provisions for accounts receivable up to €500,000 by the end of the year, those are already priced in. Eva?
Thank you. Looking at the provisions taken for your clinics just acquired in Q2, is that standard practice for the company, that is immediate provisioning? Should we generally account for provisioning when you announce acquisitions?
Well, this really requires greater look into IFRS standards, and the example that you're referring to, which is Olainfarm Q2, which is basically a small, polyclinic in the town of Olainfarm. The sort of business reason behind that is a company called Diomed, and I've been talking about it a few webinars ago. Diomed has a good reputation in terms of diagnostics. It has been one of the leaders in diagnostics, medical diagnostics in Riga for quite many years. Now, the medical service market is starting to consolidate, and one thing that therefore Diomed was lacking was sort of, I could call it, an access to the client, and that was the primary reason, one of the main reasons behind us acquiring OVC. Or especially standards. Now, if you look at OVC separately, then of course, being having a conservative approach, most people would say that yes, it does require provisions. But then again, if you look what potentially the the flow of clients could be created for Diomed, then in that sense, that seems to be an investment worth taking. Sometimes, yes, sometimes when you do the purchase price allocations, you have sizable goodwills rising, and then there are some details like improvements that you made to your acquisition target after acquisition cannot be counted, taken into consideration once you do the evaluation, and that particularly in terms of biotest, that creates some weird things that basically if the production premises are not fully completed, then you cannot, for purposes of evaluation, account all potential business that might arise there once you start packing your products there. So there are some very fine details in terms of how you evaluate them, but in many smaller cases when we feel it might be at least somewhat relevant, we are taking the conservative sort of approach, and we are doing some sort of provisions relatively quickly, and might when possible might do the provisioning later. But this is very, very complicated. I mean, Tonus we acquired for 14 million, and there's never been a question of any provisioning. And sometimes there is, but not necessarily because the business is much worse, but because there are some, let's say, not all the synergies. Yeah, that would be a good way to answer it. Not all the synergies that the new acquisition could bring to the group could be taken into account when you need to formally think of provisions. So this is this situation is really different from case to case. I know it was a messy answer, but I tried my best. Eva?
Thank you. The next question. Does your rundown today on farm R&D imply that the company will increase its drug development expenditures?
Yes, but my rundown on farm R&D basically was, like I said, was a promise kept. But yes, if you try to, somehow look at that part of the webinar and try to relate that to Olainfarm in any way, trying to find a message in it, then my message probably was that for the reasons you saw there, it's quite unlikely that Olainfarm in the near future will try to develop a brand new molecule of its own. But of course, if you look at our financials and our different project activities, our R&D activities are increasing, and expenditures are somewhat growing and more targeted, I would say. And like I said in the management report, there are some products which are not brand new molecules, but are new products to Olainfarm. We might expect them on the market in the next, 18 to 24 months or so. Eva?
Thank you. Which areas will drive the growth in 2018?
Yeah, well, in 2018, we see Sylvanos that we are investing quite heavily in marketing in CIS countries. One of the things we've done for them in this year, and that partially explains the sales cost increase this year, is that we organized their presence in major Russian pharmacy chains in Moscow. So we do expect that to add to our growth in 2018. Also, we are looking at how to expand the markets of Tonus Elast in 2018. We do hope that we have the first 2 products registered in Turkey in 2018. However, I don't think that in the first year of commercialization in the new market that would make any major improvements. Yes, so and of course all the new markets that we as Olainfarm have entered in recent history, they will add to our growth. It's probably slightly premature to give you any particular number of 2018, but all these factors, I do see they might add up to 10 million euros in terms of sales in 2018. And like I said, yeah, a couple of pharmacies might come to the picture. So those would be sort of organic, semi-organic growth drivers. As far as provisions are concerned, like I said, Ukrainian provisions that we made last year is an open question. We see Ukrainian sales dropping, and so obviously it's a bit premature to talk about re-provisioning of those. Other provisions, like for instance OVC, it really depends on if we might decide to merge two companies, OVC and Diamed, then that might lead to some re-provisioning. I'd say no specific plan for re-provisions can be seen for next 6 to 9 months. But theoretically, if some of these projects are performing well, then this is very much a possibility. Especially, I would say, Ukraine. If Ukrainian volumes are growing and we manage to reduce the outstanding receivables in Ukraine, we might see some re-provisions there, but not as early as we initially thought. Eva?
Yes, and currently the last question is about the reversal of provisions. Do you see potential for it from previous years?
Yeah, that's what I just referred to by calling them re-provisioning. That we made major provisions to our Ukrainian receivables, last year, we did expect that sales volumes to Ukraine would be still quite nice this year, and on that background, we might re-provision some of the outstanding. But as you saw from our sales by country chart, it doesn't seem to be the case this year. As for other re-provisioning, so reversal of provisions, obviously, for instance, if we decide to merge that with Diamet, then that might be the case, but that's not going to happen any time in the next 6 to 9 months. Hello?
Okay, thank you. All questions have been answered, and as always, recording of the webinar will be available in the Nasdaq Baltic YouTube channel and in company's announcements. Salvi, thank you for spending the last hour with us. Participants, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. It was really nice to see that, although the webinar might this time be somewhat boring, there'll be relatively many attendees, and more than 20 of them stayed throughout the webinar. So I hope it was interesting, and you're also very welcome to give me a hint of what it is you might want to hear next time after the sort of official part of the webinar. But thank you very much for joining, and see you in about 3 months.